Okay, so there's a lot to unpack from this episode, actually. In this review episode, I want to talk about three things. First, I want to talk about Sharon Carter's appearance in this episode and why I don't think that she's the power broker. Secondly, I want to visit our ongoing theme for this review companion, which is the ghost of Steve Rogers. And finally, I want to talk about the effect of having no focal point for goodness and what that's doing to this Falcon and the Winter Soldier universe here. Now, first and foremost, spoiler alert. Keep this in mind as we move through the rest of this episode. Okay, so let's dive into Sharon Carter's appearance here in this third episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now, I've long said from the beginning that I think that Sharon was going to be the next Captain America, and she still might be. However, the going trend right now is thinking that she is actually the infamous power broker, and I'm not sure that that's actually the case. Marvel has done a really good job of weaving in and out of the comic books in their cinematic universe, and in this case, I think they're probably gonna move a little bit closer to the comics themselves. You see, in the comics, the power broker is a kind of 80s yuppie, think Christian Bale from American Psycho kind of a character. He often sells the serum to customers, and then when they become super, strong or super soldiers in a sense, he gets them addicted to chemicals that he says will help stabilize their powers. And that way he's always keeping them kind of under his thumb, being able to control these individuals. Well, one such individual from the comics is Sharon Ventura. Now, is it a coincidence that you have the name Sharon here and the name Sharon in the comics? Yeah, it probably could be. There's certainly different individuals in these universes, right? They're not the same person, but there are very similar ties, and I could see Marvel playing with that name connection a little bit here. Now, Sharon clearly has power in this world here, this underworld, if you will, and she wields it quite well. However, if she were the power broker, I'm not so sure she would have worked this hard to make sure that Bucky and Sam stay safe from the bounty hunters. Additionally, I'm not sure she would have put herself out there the way that she does. What I think is that it's likely she does work for the power broker because I think Marvel would want to give us that aha moment. She is the power broker, but only to show that she actually works for the power broker, but that she's also a double agent, either with maybe some sort of shield agency kind of thing or an American spy agency. I think we're going to learn that she is actually doing her double agent thing here. Now, one of the reasons why I think that's the case also is because the series has yet to give us a focal point of hope in some way, and everybody is still very much talking about Steve Rogers and what he meant to the world. And Sharon is the one who has a nice legacy between Steve and Peggy Carter as well. So she could be that individual who sparks or ignites that hopefulness that this universe very much needs. Of course, this ties into our running theme of the ghost of Steve Rogers and how he just seems to be haunting individuals more than actually inspiring them. At a very key moment in this episode, Sam and Bucky have an exchange where Sam says he sort of wishes that he just destroyed the shield. And of course, Bucky pushes back against this and says that shield represents a lot of things to a lot of people. And he says that he's going to be the one to take the shield from John Walker. Now, in my pre-watch episode for this series, I talked about the pros and cons of the next Captain America being Sam, Bucky, and Sharon. And what I talked about with Bucky was that he had, I think, the easiest and almost most logical narrative for taking the shield. He not only knew Steve well, but he's also a super soldier himself, and he would have a tremendous redemption arc, story arc, for this series, which I think would work very well because, it's said usually that Americans like a good redemption story arc, but really, humanity likes a good redemption story. Now, before Bucky can actually don the shield and put on the suit, he's going to have to get rid of that self-pity and doubt that he has about himself, because what we're learning from John Walker is that the moniker of Captain America, the shield, the suit, all of that can have the effect of altering and changing the individual who is within that suit. Remember, at the beginning of this series, John Walker is shown to us as being actually quite a humble and down-to-earth kind of a guy. And yet here he is in this episode slamming one of the Flag Smashers into the corner, or at least a supporter of the Flag Smashers, into the corner and saying, "Do you know who I am?" And the supporter's like, "Yeah, and I don't care." That's actually a really important moment because it shows that for John Walker, the suit or the symbol is becoming much greater than the individual himself. And that's something that Steve Rogers would never allow to happen. Steve is the one who made Captain America, the suit, the shield, symbolic. So again, before Bucky or anyone can really wear the suit and hold the shield, you're going to have to find an individual who believes in humanity more than they believe in the actual symbols themselves. And until Bucky or Sam or even Sharon is able to do that, no one can carry that symbol. Finally, I want to talk a bit about the lack of a focal point of good and the effect that seems to be having on this entire Falcon and Winter Soldier, universe or world here. Toward the end of the episode, we get an interesting scene with the Flag Smashers where they're grabbing supplies from one place in order to give it to their camp. And they're introduced as a kind of Robin Hood-esque group here. And normally we side with Robin Hood-esque individuals because we believe in the idea that they're doing good, but maybe through ill means. However, in this case, when they blow up the building with the people still inside, they cross a line. And it's up to us as viewers to think about, in doing so, do they remove or should they have removed our sensitivity to their cause? Marvel themselves seems to answer this question with the Flag Smasher henchman guy, I don't remember his name, who is surprised and tells Carly, there were people still in that building when we blew it up. And Carly says that that's the only language that they understand is violence. That should be our signal to break our sympathy with them, at least enough to know that we can understand their plight, but we shouldn't condone it. But you see, this is the problem with complexity and evil. If you don't have some sort of force that holds together the ideal of what is good, it's very difficult to know or to judge what others are doing around that force. So I think it's pretty straightforward that we would say Steve Rogers would not say that this is okay. Would Steve Rogers have said that it was okay to break out Helmut Zemo? I mean, he did break out the Winter Soldier, right? He did help the Winter Soldier. He did go on the lam, right, and run with Sam. So there are elements where we could see Steve try to create the greater good through ill means. But is there an ethical line that he won't cross? The answer is yes. He wouldn't cross the line of killing those people in that room. So what do we do with that here? Well, without, again, that ethical force, some sort of locus of good, we don't really know how to judge what they're doing, honestly. And that makes this somewhat frustrating, even though still entertaining. So at the end of this episode, I actually just felt kind of depressed, honestly. Like Marvel does a really good job of establishing really deep falls, right? Deep caverns from which you can get majestic rising action. And I think this episode was probably trying to establish the deepest fall that they thought they could. But I would caution them in saying, I think by the end of episode 4, you've got to give us some sort of figure of good or symbol of good for us to latch onto just so we don't fall into a kind of viewer depressive state at this world, right? Because I think our heart goes out to people like Sam, who did all that work with the Avengers, and he can't even get a loan. That's ridiculous, quite honestly. Like, what it makes us question what exactly is going on in this post-blip world here. How did the Avengers lose so much of their cachet after Endgame? It's a legitimate question. So let me know in the comments below a couple of things. One, do you think that we're due for some sort of hopeful figure or symbol? And do we need it before the last episode, which I believe is episode 6? Secondly, do you think Sharon Carter is the power broker? Or is the power broker somebody else? Let me know what you think.